A very good evening and welcome to this evening's episode of On the Record. Well, on the program tonight, we search for answers and the minister in charge as the crisis continues at several South African universities. But we also bring you some good news worthy of celebrating. First, some of the universities we've been tracking for you today. At the University of Pretoria, students are demanding a change to the university's language policy. Currently, the University of Pretoria conducts its affairs in both English and Afrikaans. In the Northwest, students are demanding that the university allow students with historical debt to register now. They're also calling for the SRC to be disbanded, the SRC that was disbanded early this year to be reinstated. Going to Cape Town, earlier this year, University of Cape Town students built a shack on campus to highlight the accommodation crisis at the institution. What started off as a peaceful protest quickly turned nasty after students burned some artwork belonging to the university as part of their call for transformation at that institution. Coming back to the Free State, earlier this week, a video posted on social media sent further shockwaves throughout the country. Outsourcing must fall. Protesters marched onto a rugby field where a varsity cup game was being played. An altercation followed with white rugby supporters also going onto the field. Students at the institution have demanded that the Vice-Chancellor resign for outsourcing to fall and for the incident to be investigated. Well, we look now at a team of investigators is looking into yesterday's acts of violence and criminality at the Mahikeng campus of the Northwest University. A case of arson and allegations of brutality by the university's campus security are being investigated. The campus has been closed indefinitely.
Campus security dispersing protesters. The scene at the Mahikeng campus yesterday. Tensions have been simmering here for quite some time. They reached a boiling point yesterday. This student alleges he was shot with live ammunition while fleeing.
There was blood all over. Then I tried to run as much as I can, but I fell. Even when I was down, they continued shooting at us.
The university management says it's not aware of live ammunition being used. Last night, the Science Center and Administration block were set alight, causing extensive damage. Today, the destruction is clearly evident. While the situation is calm here at the Mahikeng campus of the Northwest University, hundreds of students have been instructed to leave the campus. As you can see behind me, the university management says it cannot guarantee their safety.
This is totally unacceptable. We've got students who come from Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mpumalanga, KZN, Limpopo. Where are they supposed to go?
Police say an investigation is underway.
We also received reports that there are students that were shot. Currently, they are lying in a hospital. After they shall have been discharged, they will be expected to come to the police station to lay charges.
A heavy police contingent has been deployed to the besieged campus. For now, students can only wait until the impasse is resolved, as management cannot say when lectures will resume. Tatai, SABC News, Mahikeng.
Well, we were hoping to get the Vice-Chancellor at the University of the Northwest to join us. Fortunately, a short while ago, we were sent a statement that says, among other things, that the institutional office has noted with great concern reported acts of vandalism and violence. Well, we thought as people who are on the ground, they wouldn't be talking about incidents of reported violence and arson. But then that's what we got, that's the reply we got from the university's management. Well, moving right on to the University of Pretoria, the university says it will restart the process of amending its controversial language policy. Vice-Chancellor Professor Cheryl Del Rey says the process was compromised by the ongoing violent student protests.
To go back to the drawing board to look at its language policy. The institution says it refuses to be pressured into taking a certain position. It blames student protests for jeopardizing the consultation process.
We were at the very beginning when this became an issue of protest. And very importantly, it became an issue of violent protest, and violence is totally unacceptable. We can only have a process, a fair, a transparent process, when the conditions for peaceful engagement have been firmly returned to this university.
TAG students have come to blows over the university's language policy. The EFF Student Command-led group wants Afrikaans abolished as a second medium of instruction, while AfriForum Youth wants Afrikaans to stay. Management says there are no shortcuts.
This is a matter of national interest. It's not just a University of Pretoria matter, because of the national question is, how do we uphold our commitment to multilingualism, which is in the Constitution? So there has to be a sectoral discussion. By sectoral discussion, I mean all 26 universities looking at how we're going to collectively and individually honor that commitment.
The university says it believes the student protests have been influenced by outside forces. Calm seems to have been restored at the University of Pretoria. Several days have passed with no violent student protests, but the institution remains closed. Sipho Stirman, SABC News, Pretoria.
While several protesting students from the University of the Free State have been arrested. This after they tried to destroy a statue of M.T. Steyn at the university's campus. Students rejected management's response to their memorandum of demands. And soon after, chaos erupted on campus, forcing police to intervene, or at least so we are told. Officials fired stun grenades to disperse the large crowd of protesters. Students say they want Vice Chancellor and Rector Jonathan Jansen to step down. Well, joining us from our studio in Bloemfontein is the University of the Free State's SRC President, Mr. Lindokuhle Ntuli. Mr. Ntuli, thanks very much for joining us. If you could please tell us what is happening right now as we speak at the university.
Thank you very much for having me, Vuyo. What is happening currently, the securities and the police have been going into each and every residences. They are looking for students. They've been firing with firearms at students. Students are hiding. Some of the students have been arrested already. It's very unfortunate that it has to turn this way. A peaceful protest ends to violence. We never wanted the protest to end to violence. There is no student leader. There is no leader at all who is leading the majority of the students on campus and who wants things to escalate to chaos. We do not protest because we believe it is the right thing to do. We do not protest because we like singing. We do not protest because we like causing chaos. We are protesting because we want the university to change. And in so doing, we have to make sure that we do not leave the institution the same way we found it. When our children come here in 10 years or 15 years to come, they must find this university inclusive to them as well. So hence our fight is for institutional culture, inclusive institutional culture, and also inclusive institutional symbolism. That is what we are fighting for, the complete transformation of the university. The University of the Free State is a historically white university, white Afrikaner university. And it is not different in how it presents itself from the University Free State of 1997. The University of the Free State still sells its image as if it's a white Afrikaner university, and because of the policies that they still apply, because of the culture of the institution, because of the symbols of the university. And that is why we are calling for all that to be inclusive and for the university to be decolonized.
Now, you've had engagements with Professor Jansen and his team. From where you sit, I mean, for someone who listens to what he has to say, and from reading from the stuff that he has written, one would have thought that he's a progressive academic, and that he is not only aware but would actually embrace the sorts of issues that you are raising. Is that your experience?
Well, of course, upon engaging with him, you would believe that he is a progressive rector, he is a progressive leader. But we know very well, Vuyo, there are two things with a leader. First, you have the words of a leader. And secondly, you have the actions of the leader. And at all times, the actions of the leader must always go in line with what the leader is saying. And I've always been saying this. Let us introspect deep into the dreams that have been sold by Professor Jonathan Jansen. Is the transformation he's talking about really happening at the University of the Free State? I would argue differently. A case in point is the incident that happened on Monday. A case in point is the race incident. A case in point is one of the incidents also that happened a few years ago where a black student was bumped by a car by two white students. When we said this is a racial incident, they said we are throwing a racial card. So the university is not prepared to deal with racism. Under Professor Jonathan Jansen's administration, we also saw the statement that was released by the university after the incident that occurred on Monday. The university failed to identify what the root cause of the problem is. In its statement, the university said the spectators who were at the rugby match attacked the workers and the students who were protesting. The university could not say right on the spot the white students and their parents who were sitting on the stands attacked the protesters and the students. We can't take away this from what it is actually, or from what it is. It is a racial matter, and without us having to clearly define that this is a racial matter, we'll never be able to solve the situation. What was more appalling and what was more disturbing was that the Vice Chancellor of the university was at the match. He did not say anything when the white students was attacking the workers and the students. You would find ridiculous situations where old ladies who were cleaners at the university, defenseless young ladies, were being kicked like dogs by white students and their parents. And more interesting, some of the white professors who were at the game also jumped in and kicked at the students. It's a racial matter. The Vice Chancellor, shortly after the incident, continued with the game as if nothing had happened. Now that for me is a university that prioritizes minority interest at the expense of the suffering of others. That for me is a Vice Chancellor who will prioritize white supremacy at the expense of the suffering of the black majority, that is the workers and the students. And simply because they do not understand the struggle that we are going through. And that is why it's easier for them to calculate. It is more important for us to continue with the rugby match. And these are just disruptors. They do not understand what we're going through. They do not understand what it means to get paid 2,000 Rand a month and have to feed a family of 6. They do not understand what it means to take 1.5 thousand Rand out of that 2,000 Rand for transport purposes. They do not understand what it means for you to go to a loan shark and ask for money because you simply cannot afford a basic living. And these is what the workers are being subjected to on a yearly basis. Some of them have been suffering for more than 20 years, and we can no longer accept it. We can no longer watch our mothers being subjected to oppression by the university, the so-called transformed university.
Now, where to next? Are you going to protest till your demands are met, or are you going to engage in perhaps you're going to find alternative ways of dealing with the problem? Because at the end of the day, you too have to go back to class and study.
Absolutely. Like I said, the issue is not just about the workers, but it's also about the victimization of the students. Professor Jonathan Jansen has victimized a lot of students who fundamentally disagree with him. And to cite a few cases, because I do not just speak without bringing evidence to the table. Last week, when the protest of the workers started, it was very peaceful. the spokesperson of the protest, who is a student at the university and also employed by the institution, was dismissed for participating in a peaceful protest. A month ago, a student who participated and instigated the Fees Must Fall protest was academically excluded by the rector, and his photo was posted at every entrance of the university so as to disallow him from entering the university. There is no national rule, no provincial rule, or even institutional rule that regulates that.
Then what's going to happen next? What are you guys going to do? Are you saying that you're going to continue with the protests until all your demands are met, or are you going to enlist perhaps the support of other people outside the university and get them to find some common ground, or at least some temporary resolution to the matter, but one that will also enable you to go back to school? Because the current situation is unsustainable.
I'm afraid, if we leave this stone unturned, we run the risk of having the university to continue exactly as it is. We have a responsibility to rise up when the university is not going in accordance with the direction and the provisions of the Constitution. The university is not an isolated institution. The university exists within the broader South African society, and that society is regulated by the Supreme Constitution of the Republic. And the universities must then fulfill the obligations imposed by the Constitution of the Republic. We will continue to protest peacefully. We will continue with peaceful demonstrations for the university to respond positively to our demands. And we will also allow room for engagement and see how better we can get the matters resolved.
Mr. Lindokuhle Ntuli, UFS SRC President, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, sir.
Aluta continua, certainly from what Mr. Ntuli is telling us. That's the situation at the University of the Free State, a student's perspective of what is happening in at least 4 universities as we speak. Well, we're going to take a quick break. When we continue with tonight's conversations, we will be speaking to one man who, amid the sea of disruptions and demolitions and protests and everything that goes with that, is holding his head high, but also a torchbearer in so many respects. It's a good and positive story given everything that's happening around universities today. That's after this short ad break.
Mancosa, Southern Africa's leading distance learning institution, accredited, affordable and accessible management education programs, higher certificates, diplomas, undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Register at Mancosa and be part of Southern Africa's leading private business school. Visit our website mancosa.co.za. Mancosa, management education reimagined.
How great would it be to have Sia back for this reunion?
He's been traveling Africa for years. He's impossible to get a hold of.
We know what he drinks.
Let's find him.
Yeah!
You think it worked?
Hey, guys!
I'm coming home, tell the world that I'm coming home.
It all comes together with a castle.
Our next guest has been awarded one of the highest orders in the land. Professor Bongani Mayosi, a renowned cardiologist who is also the head of the Department of Medicine at the University of Cape Town, joins us now from our Cape Town studios. Professor Mayosi, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, good evening, Vuyo, and thanks for having me.
Well, you would have seen, I'm sure, from the social media as soon as it was posted a couple of days ago, that your own peers have actually recognized you, young as you are, as a pioneer in the field of medicine. Take us through what actually happened this week in your own words.
Thank you very much, Vuyo, for that. As you mentioned, I am a physician, a doctor, but I'm also a scientist as well as a teacher at the medical school at the University of Cape Town. And the fundamental things that we do as teachers in the university is to transmit knowledge, but not only that, but also to produce new knowledge. And many of us are involved in research and in medicine, which is my field, research to identify better ways of diagnosing illness, of treating illness, of preventing it. And I have been doing research from the time I was a medical student in the 1980s, and more recently, the National Research Foundation has recognized the work that we've done as work that is of a world-leading nature. So, and that really means that colleagues in the field recognize that in certain areas of heart disease research and in certain areas of genetics research, we here in Cape Town, in South Africa, in Africa, are world leading when it comes to the diagnosis and treatment of those conditions.
Now, the National Research Foundation award function recognizes South African scientists who have achieved using their own rating system. And the category A, which is what you obtained, you are recognized by your peers as being a leading scholar with a high quality impact in the field that you are operating in. You are recognized for your specialization, but also for your recent research outputs. What specifically are we talking about? What have you done to deserve this rating by your own peers?
The specific area where I work is in heart disease. And there are different types of heart diseases. And the ones that I work on are heart diseases that affect poor people. And these are conditions such as tuberculosis of the heart, such as rheumatic heart valve disease, such as heart muscle disease. What our group has done here in Cape Town, working with colleagues in other parts of Africa, as well as in other parts of the world, we've done studies to show how best to treat these particular diseases. And in particular, more recently, we've done work on tuberculosis of the heart, and we've shown that there are specific drugs that can be used to prevent complications of that disease, as well as certain drugs to avoid in certain people, such as people with HIV infection. This work has been groundbreaking in that it has led to the change in the way in which this condition is treated all over the world. So the textbooks have had to be rewritten to reflect the information that comes from Cape Town on how best to treat this condition. So that's what it means to be world leading. It means that you set the pace, you set the standard for the whole world in your area of research and in your area of work. So the work in a sense becomes transformational in the field by setting a new standard on how people will be treated and how people will be helped. And in that way, this is how we save lives and improve the quality and the length of life of people affected with heart disease.
Well, it goes, I guess, without saying that you would like to see more and more academics and people in all spheres of our lives doing the kind of pioneering work that you and your team have been involved in. But when you look at what is going on in our country today, I mean, you saw the 4 campuses that we were tracking today, the tragedy of having like violent violent protests, people being beaten up. No one, whether it's vice chancellors or students or councils or the government, no one seems to be listening to the other. What goes through your mind, given the challenges that we're facing as a nation and as a continent, and given the enormous amount of work that needs to be done, not only in medicine, which is your sphere of operation, but also in other spheres of our lives?
It is a critical moment in higher education, and the students here have got to be given credit for raising very, very important and very, very fundamental issues. The issues that they raise are just. They are issues of access to higher education, the problem of fees. There are issues of the treatment of workers in our institutions, outsourcing as a mechanism that has led to exploitation of workers. They are talking about racism in our institution, which is a real problem. They are talking about institutional culture. They are talking about a curriculum that's not relevant to them. All of these issues are just, and in fact, the students have really ushered in major changes in higher education over the past few months, and there's real potential for more to be done. The great issue, of course, is that we are a constitutional state, and it's going to be important for us to listen to the students and us, in other words, as managers and as leaders of the universities, and for the students too, to recognize that they can gain more by using the constitution and the laws of the country that exist for us to move forward. The situation now is quite perilous in the sense that there has been an escalation of violence, and this is what is creating a moment of danger. And there's a need for all of us to pull back and to see if this struggle cannot be conducted using the instruments of law that exist in the country. It will not be possible to advance this cause by using violence, and the students, I think, will not succeed in that way. But if they use the constitutional mechanisms that exist, the laws, I think they have got a lot of supporters, and I think we working together can in fact transform these institutions in the shortest possible period of time.
Now, what then becomes the role of academics like you, who, while doing all the pioneering work in your respective areas of specialization, you are also sensitive to the plight of not only students, but also workers? What then, we've seen over the past few days how some of the academics at your institution have actually come forward to support the demands of the students and of the workers. But do you believe that there is a way in which people like you, and who have achieved excellence academically, who cannot be said to be, really pandering to the needs and demands of the students or playing to the gallery, so to speak, but who believe that on the one hand, there's a need to get back to school and achieve academically, but at the same time, there is a dire need for all the transformative issues that are being raised legitimately by these students? What becomes your role, and what can you do starting tomorrow?
Yes. That is a very good question, the role of academics such as ourselves. As you've pointed out, we have supported the students in the protests. We have worked with our institutions to cajole them to move forward in terms of the transformation process. But most importantly, what is needed is to transform our anger and our rage into a strategy, into a plan of how it is that we are going to, in fact, transform our institutions. The ultimate idea is to emerge with institutions that are better than they were before, that are relevant to the needs of our society, and that can, in fact, serve as a beacon to the whole world on how these types of problems are dealt with. I think we as South Africans are known to have found ways of dealing with great challenges such as this in such a way that the way we deal with them, we provide leadership to the world. So our role as academics is to use our intellectual power to think about how do we transform our curricula so that they are relevant to Africa. How do we raise the next generation of black scholars in this country so that they are 10 times better than their predecessors? How do we, in fact, provide leadership to the world? In fact, I'm reminded by a paper written by Joel Nachitenze over the weekend, which he entitled The Black Man's Burden. Our ultimate challenge as black people in South Africa is to lead society. It is not to break down, but to build and to put together programs that show that we can, in fact, become better. We can, in fact, extend opportunities to all. We can, in fact, uproot poverty, and we can, in fact, be a beacon to the whole world and be world class. So this moment, Vuyo put in summary, really calls for great intellectual work. It calls for great honesty on our parts. It calls for great openness. It calls us to move forward together using, in fact, the instruments of law and other instruments that already exist to talk, to think, to work together and come up with solutions that will be durable into the future.
Professor Mayosi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Mayosi from the University of Cape Town. Well, the question we want to ask this evening, which we had hoped to ask to the Minister as well, is what went wrong? Where did we go wrong? How did we get to where we are today, where everything seems to be at breaking point? My next guest is someone who started it all. He was the first head of the Department of Higher Education, but he is also a former Vice Chancellor himself, but also a political activist who, at the very least, was part of the conversations that went on after 1994 about the kind of higher education institutions that we want to build, the kinds of students we want to mold, but also the kind of country we want to build. He joins me after this short ad break.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Ahika Mano produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julia Mpoko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. And if you just joined us, we're looking at the crisis at universities. Well, in the absence of answers to some of our questions from the Minister of Higher Education, we're looking at academics, but also former vice chancellors, but also people who have been involved in this space. And my next guest, Itumeleng Musala, is a former vice chancellor, but he is also the first head of what was then, right at the beginning, a unit within the Department of Education dealing with higher education. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us, Tao.
Thank you, Vuyo.
Well, let's go back. We don't have a lot of time to go back in history, but just to be able to put certain things into context. When post-1994, those of you who are operating in this space or who are tasked with very specific responsibility, and yours specifically and your peers, was to look at the kind of higher education system that we needed to put in place as a country, the kind of regime that would take us forward. What were the considerations? What were the key considerations? What did you want to do, or what did you want to achieve?
Well, we most importantly wanted to reverse the past. And there was agreement on that. Everybody agreed with the intention to reverse the past. I think the problem was that we understood the past differently. For the majority of people in South Africa, the past was the colonial past, it was the European past, it was the apartheid past, it was the imperialist past. But clearly, after a few years of democracy, it is evident that other people saw it differently. They thought that the past was purely or simply the past of exclusion. Now, of course, exclusion was the way in which colonialism expressed itself. It was the way in which imperialism expressed itself. It was the way in which white Western European culture and gender chauvinism of the West expressed itself. But to simply locate it within the concept of exclusion was never enough. And so what everybody did was to try and include. So we changed nothing. We simply opened up the doors of white institutions for black people, the doors of the white economy for black people, the doors of predominantly white culture for black people. So black people were supposedly to be brought inside of what continued to be a white edifice. But reversal and uprooting of that past was in fact what we were supposed to be doing.
Where did we go wrong? Were we sleeping? Or was the situation too overwhelming and you couldn't deal with it properly? Or was there a deliberateness on the part of certain people to actually make sure that you never achieve what you set out to achieve?
We went wrong at Kempton Park. At Kempton Park, we compromised and we were compromised, both as a people, as a nation, and as the land. Our culture was compromised, our history was compromised, the ideals that we had fought, died for, went to prison for were compromised. And the greatest expression of that compromise is the white Western liberal democratic paradigm that we locked ourselves into. Unfortunately, South Africa was never changed. South Africa was accommodated within a different paradigm, ideological, social, political, and cultural paradigm. We have a white Western liberal constitution. We hail it. We say it is the best in the world because the white world loves it, because the West loves it. I don't know if it means anything to the ordinary South African in the rural areas, the ordinary South African in the street, or even the young people that we are now seeing in the university revolting, because that constitution doesn't seem to have affected, for example, the most important thing in education. I mean, I spent all my life in education, the curriculum. The curriculum continues to be a colonial trap. It continues to be a Western cultural trap. People talk about violence.
What could our constitution have said to change the situation we're seeing at our universities today? What should it have said, for example,
it should have
said to ensure that we're not seeing what we're seeing at our universities today?
The constitution should have become an African constitution.
Which in real and practical terms means what?
Means that this land, South Africa, Azania in my terms, that this land is the land of the African people, and it belongs to African people. It doesn't belong to all who live in it. It belongs to African people. Those who live in it who are not African are welcome to live in this land, but this land belongs to African people. It should have meant that African culture is at the heart of the values that drive that constitution. It is not so. The values that drive this constitution are white Western liberal values. It should have meant that the economy of the African people is protected. The foundations are set in place to make sure that black people and African people in particular will, in time, in good time, and in not so long, will be able to take over the heights of the economy. None of that has happened. The reason is we compromised and we were compromised. And now it is expressing itself through what is happening in the universities. We have not liberated the universities. We've been trying to transform them. I don't understand this concept of transformation. You transform only when you transform. You want to change what exists. When you liberate, you want to eliminate what exists. And part of the problem is that the liberal paradigm brought us these conceptual frameworks. That means that we will transform things. We will allow black people to also become human beings. We will allow black students to also become human beings. But first and foremost, human beings are white people.
But did we have the luxury of time and the resources and everything that goes with that to actually start afresh, so to speak? What in very real and practical terms, what could it have meant? In other words, we're standing, we're in 1994. 26th of February. All right? We're saying we're going to start afresh. What should we have done that we didn't do? And with the benefit of hindsight, is what is responsible for what we're seeing right now?
We should have given legal ownership of the land to the owners of the land, African and black people of South Africa. It shouldn't have been difficult. We've changed the laws of this country. We did not change property rights. We therefore did not affect the land. We should have decreed that the economy shall be in the hands of the people of South Africa as a whole. We should have declared that African culture and particularly African languages will be the dominant languages in this country. We're the only country where the languages of the indigenous people are not dominant. In every other country in the world, I should have been speaking to you in Setswana, and you should have having interpreters here helping the people to hear if they needed to hear in any other language. You should have been speaking to me in Xhosa, and that is not happening. And so the West continues to dominate us through its culture, through the economy, and through property ownership relationships.
We're going to take a quick ad break. When we return, I want you to wear your hat of a Vice Chancellor and tell us how, in the years that you're operating in that space, with those responsibilities, what made your life easy or difficult? That's after this short ad break.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon, you're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
The big news is Newsroom.
We also stream live on YouTube.
Whether you're at home, at the office or at the gym, wherever you are, Newsroom is right there with you. Bringing you all the latest news, updates, sports, weather, and everything in between. Get all the latest news you need on the go via live streaming on our YouTube channel. That's Newsroom, weekdays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back. I'm speaking to Itumeleng Masala, a former Vice Chancellor, a former bureaucrat in the Department of Education, but also an activist. Now, from being an activist, you became a bureaucrat in the Department of Education. Then at some point, you became a Vice Chancellor. What did you do during that area? Take us through very briefly your experiences in those years and what it taught you about the things we had managed to do and the things we hadn't done.
Well, I came there really with the advantage, I suppose, compared to other people, that I had just come from the Department of Education, where I was in charge of higher education, and I knew what it was that the government was trying to do through the Higher Education Act and through all of the other things, policy things we put in place. So it was an opportunity to go and implement. And one of the key things that I spent time on was in making sure that we had a council, a governing structure that understood the key purpose of higher education, that we were on a program of change, on a program of liberating education itself in order to liberate our people and our country. And I was very lucky. I had a council that was open, that was ready to learn, that was led by someone who was an academic himself. So he wasn't a political appointee. He was himself an activist and an academic and a great professor in our country, Professor Mokoko. But I also had been a student myself and an activist. You know, I had been on campuses during the times of Steve Biko and other people, and I understood student politics. So one of my key areas of work was to make sure that I lead with the students.
What did you manage to achieve?
Well, we achieved...
you had a good council. You were a student, and with that background, you knew how to relate to the students. That helped you achieve what?
Well, it helped me achieve an institution that could run and run well, an institution that could set itself goals and goals that worked. I also, of course, in addition to students, had a very strong academic stuff in the sense of a progressive academic staff. So there was a progressive council, a progressive management staff, a progressive academic staff, and progressive students. So, and what we did was we did higher education the progressive way. You said to me earlier, what were your bad moments, what were your weak moments? I never had bad moments at my institution. We really had a great time. Unfortunately, time comes to an end after a while. Our challenges was how to get government to move at the same pace as we were moving, how to get government to understand that it is not allowable for a lecturer to stand in front of a hungry child and try and take them through some major higher education conceptual trip. You know, students used to come to me and say, we're hungry, period. Forget about anything else, we are hungry, you know. And with the kind of resources we were being given, it was not possible to keep students with something in their tummy and make them learn. So in fact, there was sabotage as far as I was concerned from the system itself. So higher education is only possible when the conditions that we put in place are conducive.
Now, when you look at the students protesting, when you hear the issues that they're raising, what goes through your mind?
What goes through my mind is 22 years later, it's still like this. There is no difference. There was never a police force on my campus. Police were banned. They were never going to come in there. I told the council, I told the university academics, I told the students I will never unleash students on black kids. Because when you do that, you do exactly what white people used to do on the rest of us throughout our history of oppression. So what goes through my mind is, what is the difference between what is happening now, where the establishment is taking an antagonistic position against students and even unleashing violence against the students and then crying foul about violence?
If you were a vice chancellor today, you are met with students who are violent, some of them, burning and demolishing property, some of them. How would you deal with that situation?
My question is, first of all, why is it that students are getting violent now? They never got violent in all the years of my leadership as a vice chancellor. Not once did I have any violent protest on my campus. But your question is, if I were a vice chancellor now, what would I do? I would find out what the root of the violence is, what the root of the anger is, what gets them to a desperate. I would know that something's wrong with me, first and foremost, before I find something wrong with the students. So the violence is an expression of something absolutely incorrect about the way I am leading the university. So that is my verdict. My verdict is, my judgment is that something is wrong with me as a vice chancellor.
If you had to give one piece of advice to the Minister of Education about how to deal with these situations, what would you say to him?
I would ask him to go back to the fundamentals. Him and I were together at the time at the beginning. He was chairperson of the portfolio committee when I was in charge of higher education in the department. And we decided then that transformation, change is not negotiable. There has to be change. What has happened in between, the compromise has caught up with us. I would ask him to look at what is it that happened at Kempton Park that is messing up what he's trying to do now.
Tumeleng Masala, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tao.
Dr. Tumeleng Masala, of course. With that, we come to the end of this final episode of On the Record this week. From me, Vuyo Mvoko, it's a goodbye until Monday. If the Minister of Higher Education is listening, that invitation is still open. Good night.
Whether you're an investment banker, an inspiring photographer, a loving parent, a taxi driver delivering precious cargo, a teacher, or an architect, we all need to plan for our future with safe, secure investments that bring financial freedom and peace of mind. Visit rsalretailbonds.gov.za. No fees and no commissions. RSA Retail Savings Bonds, the smart way to save.
Mancosa, Southern Africa's leading distance learning institution. Accredited, affordable and accessible management education programs. Higher certificates, diplomas, undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. Register at Mancosa and be part of Southern Africa's leading private business school. Visit our website mancosa.co.za. Mancosa, management education reimagined.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide.